Instructor Kelrix of the Aurelian Concord had trained recruits from a dozen gentle worlds, and none of them had survived a full cycle on vortices without begging for evacuation. The planet was a sanctioned Deathworld training ground. Its storms flayed metal and its gravity crushed fragile bones. When the newest exchange cadet arrived, a single human named Mara Ellison, Kelrix laughed openly. The sound echoed through the stone hall as he gestured at her slim frame and unarmored posture. Humans were newcomers to the Concord, rumored to be adaptable but physically unimpressive by Galactic standards. Mara stood at attention while the other cadets watched with thinly veiled pity. Kelrix announced the endurance trial with theatrical relish, a forced march across the basalt flats during storm season, followed by shelter construction under live conditions. The Aurelian instructor explained that failure meant extraction, an academic disgrace. He leaned close to Mara and said softly that she should signal for rescue early to avoid permanent damage. Mara only nodded, eyes steady. The march began under a bruised sky. Gravity pressed like a hand on the spine. The basalt radiated heat. An acidic wind scoured exposed skin. Cadets stumbled within the first hour, Kelrix observed with smug satisfaction, expecting the human to collapse first. Instead, Mara adjusted. Her breathing shortened her stride and kept moving. She wrapped cloth around her face to filter the dust, used gel packs to protect joints, and rationed water with practiced discipline. Kelrix felt irritation creep in. Humans were not supposed to look comfortable here. As the sun dipped, the sky darkened unnaturally fast. Storm indicators spiked. The instructor checked his slate and frowned. The Deathworld storm was advancing faster than predicted. He ordered the cadets to quicken pace. Panic spread. Winds howled like living things. Lightning crawled across the clouds. Kelrix shouted commands, but the storm swallowed sound. Mara reached a faltering cadet and hauled him upright. Pointing toward a rocky outcrop, she began directing others without waiting for permission. Kelrix opened his mouth to reprimand her, then hesitated, because the storm hit with brutal suddenness. Walls of rain like liquid stone, wind that lifted bodies, and thunder that cracked the ground. Visibility vanished, and the instructor realized, with a chill deeper than the cold, that his confidence had been misplaced, and his laughter might soon cost lives. The Deathworld storm did not arrive so much as erupt. One moment the cadets struggled against rising wind. The next the world dissolved into chaos. Rain struck with kinetic force, bruising through armor. Lightning slammed into the flats, leaving glassed scars. Kelrix fought to maintain command, but his species relied on pheromone signals and visual cues. Both useless now. Panic fractured the formation. Several cadets were blown off their feet. One vanished into the rain. Mara dropped to a knee, drove her baton into a fissure, and anchored herself with a line. She signaled with sharp hand motions. Universal and clear. One by one, cadets crawled toward her. Kelrix watched in disbelief as the human improvised under conditions that paralyzed him. She shouted into the storm, voice carrying through controlled force rather than volume, directing them to form a chain, to stay low, to move when the wind ebbed. A massive gust tore Kelrix from his footing. He slammed against rock. Pain flared. His arm went numb. For the first time in his career, the instructor was helpless. Mara reached him, clipped him to the line, and dragged him toward the outcrop. Her face was calm, focused, eyes narrowed against the rain. Kelrix felt shame burn hotter than the storm. Shelter was impossible to build in the open, so Mara led them into a narrow crevice. She assessed the space, noted drainage, wind angles, and loose stone. She ordered the strongest cadets to brace the entrance with packs and slabs, others to dig channels with bare hands. Kelrix tried to assert authority, but his voice shook, and he deferred without realizing it. Hours passed, measured only by endurance. The storm roared, but the crevice held. Water diverted, bodies pressed together for warmth. Mara rotated positions to prevent hypothermia, shared calories, monitored breathing. She treated Kelrix's injured arm, setting it with efficient care. He expected roughness. Instead, she was precise and gentle, explaining each step, apologizing for the pain. The instructor stared at her, mind racing. This was not raw strength. This was practiced survival. Something carved by a homeworld that punished mistakes relentlessly. As the storm peaked, a thunderclap cliff part of the entrance. Panic surged. Mara reacted instantly, reinforcing the barrier, taking the brunt of falling debris. Kelrix screamed for her to stop, but she did not slow. When the storm finally began to wane, leaving only rain and distant thunder, every cadet was alive. Injured but breathing, Kelrix realized then that his laughter had been born of ignorance, and that the human endurance he mocked was something far deeper than muscle. It was a doctrine, a culture, a refusal to yield even when the world itself tried to kill you. Dawn on Vorthexus was a pale, exhausted thing. The storm retreated like a predator sated for now, leaving wreckage and silence. Kelrix emerged from the crevice supported by 2 cadets, his arm bound, his authority wounded more deeply than his body. He surveyed the survivors, all present, all alive. An outcome statistically impossible under Concord projections. His gaze returned again and again to Mara, who was already checking injuries, logging resources, and scanning the sky for secondary fronts. The extraction beacon remained untouched. Kelrix cleared his throat and addressed the group. His voice lacked its usual sharpness. He acknowledged the human cadet's actions. Formally, before witnesses, a gesture not taken lightly in Aurelian culture. Mara accepted with a nod. No triumph, no relief, only readiness. The march back to base was slow. The flats transformed into mud and shattered stone. Kelrix walked beside Mara when he could, asking questions he had never thought to ask, about human training, about how she knew what to do. She spoke of disaster response drills, of wilderness survival courses, of a childhood where storms, earthquakes, and heat waves were part of life. Humans learned early that nature was indifferent, she said, and preparation was respect. Endurance was not about ignoring pain, but about managing it, using it as information. Kelrix listened, humbled. Back at base, medics swarmed the cadets. Debriefing officers arrived, expecting fatalities. When Kelrix reported 0 losses, disbelief spread. Data was checked and rechecked. The storm had exceeded safe parameters. The trial should have been aborted. Responsibility weighed on him. During the official inquiry, Kelrix spoke plainly. He admitted his underestimation, his mockery, and his failure to adapt command to conditions. He credited Mara Ellison with decisive leadership. The board members exchanged glances. Human doctrine began circulating through the Concord by nightfall. Phrases like distributed leadership and adaptive endurance entered reports. Kelrix was censured, but not removed. Instead, he was ordered to revise the curriculum. With human input, when he informed Mara, he expected resentment. She surprised him again. She agreed readily, saying that shared survival knowledge saved lives. Species did not matter. As weeks passed, Kelrix observed humans differently. Their laughter after hardship, their dark humor, their insistence on redundancies. He began to understand that what he had seen as recklessness was calculated risk. Informed by long familiarity with danger, the instructor's laughter became a private memory, a mark of shame and growth. He started each new class with the story of the storm. Not as legend, but as warning. On a Deathworld, assumptions kill faster than weather. And endurance, true endurance, was the art of enduring together, adapting without pride, and respecting worlds that did not care if you lived or died. News of the Vorthex's incident spread beyond the academy. Analysts dissected sensor logs, survival times, and decision trees. The conclusion unsettled many. Human cadets demonstrated crises performance that exceeded species with higher baseline strength. Endurance metrics were revised to include psychological persistence, improvisation under stress, and cooperative resilience. Kelrix found himself invited to briefings he once only read about, always with Mara present, as a subject matter expert rather than a student. Some officers resisted, clinging to old hierarchies. They questioned whether the storm's survival was a fluke, fate rather than skill. Fate did not set bones, reroute floods, or maintain morale under constant threat. Mara responded calmly, presenting data, case studies from Earth, histories of disasters where survival hinged on adaptability. She spoke without bravado, letting the weight of evidence carry the argument. During one demonstration, a controlled simulation recreated storm conditions. Non-human teams failed within hours. Mixed teams, led by humans, stabilized. Kelrix watched pride bloom where laughter once lived. The Concord authorized a new program, Deathworld Preparedness Exchange. Humans were assigned as instructors across multiple sectors. Some protested, fearing cultural dilution. Others embraced it. Results spoke louder than tradition. Casualty rates dropped. Mission completion rose. Kelrix accompanied Mara to a frontier base, battered by constant environmental hazards. There he saw seasoned commanders defer to human sergeants during emergencies, not out of weakness, but wisdom. One night, as artificial storms battered the habitat dome, Kelrix asked Mara if she resented that her people were defined by hardship. She considered before answering. Humans did not seek suffering, she said, but they refused to be defined by fear of it. Endurance was not glory, it was responsibility. To keep going so others could rest. The words settled deep within him. When the storm outside finally passed, Kellerix realized that the Concorde itself was changing, becoming harder to break, more flexible, because it had learned to listen to those forged by unforgiving worlds. His own role transformed, no longer the laughing instructor, but the one who asked first, who planned for failure, who respected the storm before it arrived. Years later, the Vortex's trial became mandatory lore. Cadets of every species studied the footage, pausing on the moment where a human anchored a line in screaming wind. Instructors emphasized the silence that followed Kellerix's laughter, the space where humility was born. Kellerix himself retired from field command, taking a role as curriculum architect. His lectures began with a confession. He told cadets that arrogance was the most lethal weakness, more dangerous than any storm. Mara Ellison rose through the ranks, not as a symbol, but as a professional, leading joint task forces into environments once deemed untenable. Her teams returned, battered but alive. She credited training, teamwork, and respect for the worlds they entered. On the anniversary of the storm, Kellerix visited the flats alone. Standing where the crevice had sheltered them, the rock still bore scars. He felt the wind, remembered the rain, and the human who had dragged him back from the edge. The instructor smiled, not with mockery, but gratitude. The Concorde had survived many threats since then. Invasions, collapses, disasters, and in each, the doctrine of endurance held. Prepare, adapt, endure together. When new cadets asked why humans were trusted with the worst missions, Kellerix answered simply, because they grew up on a world that tried to kill them every day, and they learned not to laugh at storms, but to outlast them. And in that lesson, the galaxy found a way to endure,